Today we're diving in to the dark side of one of the most beloved historical figures in American history, Abraham Lincoln.
In 2015, scientists ran a DNA test on Abraham Lincoln's mother. They expected to answer a simple historical question. Instead, they uncovered a secret Lincoln begged his best friend to never reveal. A secret so dangerous, it could have destroyed his entire presidency. And a genetic result so unexpected, it rewrote everything we thought we knew about American history. A secret so dangerous that revealing it during his lifetime could have ended his career before it ever started. To understand why this secret was so dangerous, you need to understand what life was like in 19th century America. If you were born outside of marriage, the law had a name for you. Filius nullius, nobody's child. You couldn't inherit from your father. You had no rights to his name or his property. You were legally invisible. And for the mother, it was even worse. She could be dragged into court, fined, publicly humiliated, in some places physically punished, all for the crime of having you. This wasn't just social stigma. This was the law. And in politics, your enemies would use your family background like a knife. Question your character. Say you had no business holding office. Use your origins to turn people against you. Lincoln understood this world completely, which is why what he told his closest friend in a private moment on a quiet road in Illinois stayed hidden for decades. Please like and subscribe. It will really help us to reach more people. Picture this. Two men riding through rural Illinois in a horse buggy on their way to court. Just the two of them on an empty road. One of them is Abraham Lincoln. He turns to his friend and says, "I need to tell you something. Right, but promise me you won't breathe a word of it while I'm alive." His friend promised, and Lincoln told him the truth. His mother, Nancy Hanks, was born outside of marriage, an illegitimate child, and Lincoln believed his own sharp mind, his drive, his ambition. All of it came from the unknown man who fathered her, a man whose name was never written down anywhere. Then Lincoln said something that stayed with his friend for the rest of his life. "Everything I am, everything I hope to be, I owe to my mother." His friend kept that promise for over 20 years, through the presidency, through the assassination, through everything. Then he finally told the world, and the world was not ready for it. Lincoln's family was furious. Historians called it slander. His surviving son spent years trying to bury the story completely. But there was a document sitting in a courthouse in Kentucky that suggested Lincoln was telling the truth. A legal record from 1789 showing that a woman named Lucy Hanks, Nancy's mother, Lincoln's grandmother, had been taken to court and formally charged. Her crime, having children outside of marriage. The record showed she had already given birth to at least 2 children before she ever married anyone. Nancy was one of them. 5 months after that court charge, Lucy quickly married a man named Henry Sparrow, and almost immediately after the wedding, the charges were dropped. Marriage had fixed her reputation, but it didn't fix Nancy's, because Nancy still carried her mother's maiden name. Hanks, not her father's name, because her father's name was never recorded. In that era, illegitimate children carried the mother's name. What the father remained a ghost, unknown, unnamed, erased from history. Nancy grew up knowing exactly what she was in the eyes of the world, and Lincoln grew up knowing it too. Now let's talk about who Nancy Hanks actually was as a person, because she deserves more than a footnote. She grew up in one of the roughest parts of frontier America. No proper schools, no established churches, families moving constantly, chasing land and better opportunities that rarely arrived. Official records were basically non-existent in that world. Despite all of that, people who knew her described Nancy as unusually intelligent, thoughtful, a woman of deep faith who somehow learned to read in a time and place where many adults couldn't. She worked hard. She built a home in conditions that would break most people today. Log cabin, dirt floor, no heating beyond a fireplace. Winters in Indiana and Kentucky that were genuinely brutal. She raised her children with care and intention in a world that had given her very little reason to trust it. In 1818, a mysterious illness tore through their Indiana community. Nobody understood it at the time. It turned out to be caused by cows eating poisonous plants and passing toxins through their milk. Entire families were wiped out. Nancy's aunt and uncle, the people who had raised her, died first. Then Nancy fell sick. She was 34 years old. Her son Abraham was 9. He helped build her coffin. He watched them bury her on a hillside behind their farm. And years later, after everything he had been through, after everything he had achieved, the words he chose to describe her were simple. Everything I am, I owe to her. Why, for a century after Lincoln's friend published the story, historians fought bitterly about whether any of it was true. One side believed the courthouse record and the family history pointed clearly to illegitimacy. The other side insisted it was all a lie, that Nancy's mother was actually a widow, a respectable woman whose first husband had simply died young, that there was no scandal, that the whole story was invented by someone with a grudge. Neither side could prove anything definitively. The frontier records were too incomplete, too many gaps, too many missing names and dates. The debate dragged on for over 100 years, until science caught up. In 2015, a team of researchers decided to settle this with DNA. Their tool was a specific type of genetic material that passes exclusively from mothers to their children, completely unchanged. Why, generation after generation, century after century. A woman alive today can carry the same exact genetic code as her great-great-great-grandmother from 300 years ago. Lincoln himself has no living descendants. His family line ended completely in 1985. But the DNA they needed wasn't Lincoln's. It was his mother's, and his mother's sisters, daughters and granddaughters, all carried it too. The researchers spent years tracking down living people who could trace an unbroken female family line back to Lincoln's maternal ancestors. They built 2 groups. One group connected to Nancy's side of the family, the Hanks line. One group connected to the family that Lincoln's critics claimed Lucy actually came from, the Shipleys. If the 2 groups shared the same DNA, the critics were right. Same family, no scandal. What if the DNA didn't match? The debate was over. The lab results came back. The Hanks line descendants all matched each other perfectly. Same genetic marker across multiple branches of the family. No exceptions. The Shipley descendants? Completely different. Not even close. No shared maternal ancestor. Not recently. Not ever. The 2 families were genetically unrelated, which meant Lucy Hanks was never a Shipley. The widow story was wrong. The respectable origin story was fiction. Lucy Hanks was exactly who Lincoln said she was. An unmarried woman who had Nancy outside of marriage, with a man whose identity went to the grave with her. 150 years of historical argument ended in a laboratory. But when the researchers looked at the actual genetic marker the Hanks family carried, they found something that stopped them completely. The marker was called haplogroup X1C, and it made no sense for a colonial American family with Virginia roots. Here's the quick version of how genetics works across history. Every person on Earth descends from common ancestors in Africa. As humans spread across the globe over tens of thousands of years, small mutations created distinct genetic signatures in different populations. Scientists use these signatures like a trail of breadcrumbs, following them backwards to trace where different family lines actually came from. Most colonial American families of European descent carry completely predictable European markers, common signatures from Britain, Ireland, Germany. You test a random person with 18th century Virginia ancestry, and you almost always find the same few markers. X1C is not one of them. And this marker is found primarily in North Africa, the Horn of Africa, the ancient Near East, modern-day Egypt, Ethiopia, Lebanon, Israel. Regions far outside the typical European ancestry story. The highest concentration of this marker anywhere in the world is found among the Druze people, a population living across Lebanon, Syria, and Israel, where it appears in about 27% of tested individuals. In colonial American families, it's almost unheard of. What does this actually mean? It doesn't mean Lincoln had recent ancestors from North Africa or the Middle East. We're not talking about the last few generations. We're talking about something ancient, hundreds of years back. maybe more. Somewhere deep in the Hanks maternal line, there was a connection to populations from a very different part of the world. Sir, and that connection completely demolishes a story that America told itself for centuries. The idea that colonial American families were genetically clean and purely European was always a myth. Human beings have been moving, mixing, and crossing every border and ocean throughout all of history. The world was never as separate as people pretended it was. The genetic evidence from Lincoln's own family proves it. So zoom out for a second and look at the full picture. Lucy Hanks was a young woman in 18th century Virginia. She got pregnant without being married. The law treated her like a criminal. She faced charges, public shame, and permanent damage to her reputation. Nancy grew up with her mother's name and none of her father's, legally nobody's child, raised by relatives, carrying a status that the world made sure she never forgot. And Abraham Lincoln, born in a one-room cabin with a dirt floor in Kentucky, went on to hold the United States together during the worst crisis in its history, ended an institution that had existed on American soil for over 200 years, spoke words that are still quoted around the world today. He did all of it knowing the truth about his family. He knew that if his political enemies ever discovered what was in that Kentucky courthouse, they would have used it to end him. He carried that weight quietly for his entire life. And the only time he ever said it out loud was in a whisper to one trusted friend on an empty road in Illinois. The DNA confirmed what Lincoln already knew about himself, but more importantly, it confirmed what he believed about his mother, that the circumstances of her birth didn't define her. Like that the system built to shame and erase women like Lucy Hanks and children like Nancy ultimately failed, because one of those children raised a son who changed the world. Everything I am, I owe to her. He meant it then, and now we have the science to prove exactly what he was talking about.